Hello friends, I am back with another long speed build video. This time we are renovating this old Danish farm, which you will also be able to find on the gallery if you yourself want to try renovating it. For this build I have created a Danish family who want a sustainable and self-sufficient life, or at least the parents want that. The family consists of 2 adults, 3 kids and a dog. We start out with mother Karina, daddy Arne, teenager Emma, and kiddo William, baby or toddler Caroline, and then we have the doggo Egon. And yes, these are the Danish pronunciations. Now we will start out with a quick look at the original build, slightly sped up, but not that much. The farm consists of 2 old half-timbering houses with a thatched roof. I've shaped it based on classic Danish farm style with a U-shape for the work buildings, a large yard with a well in the middle, a main house at the far end, and then we have a latrine outside of the houses slightly to the side. On the first floor of the main house I have placed 1 bed chamber, 1 chamber/cabinet, 2 sitting rooms, a dining room and a fairly large kitchen, also a decent entryway. On the second floor, which you will see later, there are 2 bed chambers and 1 room with a bath. This is not really how it would have been if it was done in reality, but there aren't that many blueprints from the 1700s Danish farms to work with, but I did my best. Also, I filmed this part after I had already made the renovations in a different save file, or at least most of them. After I'd started the renovations, I had a talk with my mom, who reminded me that there should be fireplaces in every bedchamber, so that's why you see me adding it here to the old farm build, so it is closer to reality. So if you download the old farm, it will be with the added fireplaces and chimneys. But the renovation was created from the build without these extra fireplaces. Just keep that in mind. Now, this little apartment here would be for what you could call the overseer and his family. Essentially, they would have higher status than the common stable boy or maid and would thus be set up a little bit better. Therefore, they have allocated living space just for them. Now we begin the renovation simply by fixing holes in the walls, removing cobwebs, installing modern technology, moving all the dusty furniture out into the yard, also removing, dead plants and stuff. I moved the things out into the yard instead of simply selling it because I thought that since this family is all about sustainability, they might want to repurpose some of the things. However, in the end, it is only a very few objects that really got a second chance at the farm, mostly decor also. As you will see, this process of simply cleaning up the build took quite a while. Of course, it also took quite a while to build it. I did also record the process of building the old farm, but I figured that if I did upload that, it would be a separate video. Simply because otherwise this would be a 2-hour video instead of a 45-minute video, and ain't nobody got time for that. I have cut out a few pieces of this process since it gets a bit long-winded. While I do speed up the footage, there is a limit to how much I can speed it up and still have clear visuals. So please forgive me if you are watching this video for the satisfaction of seeing things get cleaned up. I am showing most of the process though. At this point in the process, I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do with the build yet. I knew that I wanted to preserve the essence of the farm, so the outside has really only been cleaned up, whereas the bigger renovations are then on the inside. So the outside looks pretty much like before, just with a few additions. Oh, and without the latrine, since we don't need it anymore now that we are, of course, installing plumbing. Now we're pretty much done with the cleanup process. We just need to add a few chimneys, and yes, I do see the roof of the latrine still being there. I did end up removing it at some point, but I don't remember exactly when I noticed it. I'm starting out with the most simple areas of the build, so the entranceway of the farm itself here is the first to get a bit spruced up. I didn't want to change too much on the shrubbery on the outskirts of the farm and so on, because I kind of like the look of, wild growth going on. I think it frames the building nicely. The next thing I did was to begin working on turning this storage chamber into a downstairs bathroom. I figured it had just the right size for that purpose, and since there's a toddler in the house, I wanted to keep most of what she needs on the lower floor. This is really just to make childcare easier for the parents, plus I wanted there to be a toilet on the lower floor regardless. Now, I placed a small cabinet type thing by the door at this point, but later I replaced it with a washer and a dryer. You can see this thing here. Basically, I had placed a lot of laundry baskets in each room, but I forgot to add the washing machine of some reason, and the downstairs bathroom is just the best space for it, I think. Now, this room I thought was a good fit for a toddler. It's not very big, but it is just big enough, I think, and it is on the first floor, which I think is most practical with toddlers. I wanted to keep the room fairly neutral in colors, but then add a color block on one wall, as you can see here. Yeah, there it is. I ended up with this pop of color with this like bright forest green to create a focal point in the room. I also thought it would give some foresty vibes with these like tree wall stickers. And I thought, you know, the carpet was nicer for small feet to play on compared to the wooden floors, especially during cold winter mornings. This is of course a practical issue you don't really deal with in game, but nevertheless. And now I will just be creating a changing table on top of a dresser, and yes, I'm aware that it won't be functional in the game, but it is just kind of an item that just should be in any toddler room. I opted for the taller dresser since it left a bit of room for the trash bin and a potty, which I thought made sense to have right next to the changing table. I would normally place potties in, you know, the bathroom, but there wasn't any proper space for it here, so now it is just decorations and last touches, and then this room is pretty much done. I could probably have added more color to the room, but I also think that would have made the room a little loud, in lack of better words. I think the more muted and light colors makes it look like a relatively calm space. Now we are almost done with this room, save for a few knickknacks and decorations. And I think it turned out pretty alright. It has most of what a toddler would need anyway. I thought I would add an extra room downstairs for the parents' bedroom, which meant I had to redo quite a bit of the floor plan. However, I ended up skipping that idea since I remembered that the teenager will be placed in the old overseer's apartment, thus there would be a room for the parents upstairs. Here you can see me trying to figure out the new floor plan. At some point I gave up and decided to come back to it at a later time. So instead I started working on making the old overseer's apartment into a suitable and modern youth apartment. I was not entirely certain what the vibe should be in the beginning, but I figured that it should be somewhat modern and bright. And some dusty pink and purple tones suited the sim Emma that is supposed to live in this little apartment better. This is where she will be preparing herself for adult life while still being in the bosom of her family. In Denmark, it is common for kids to move out of their family's home when they turn 18, and it is encouraged for teenagers to become more independent so they are ready to be on their own. I have seen several cases where the teenagers either have a larger room in the basement or they have an outhouse for themselves, which gives them a lot of freedom while still being part of the family household. And that is the idea behind this little apartment. Essentially, Emma will still be close to her family and she will probably still eat dinner with the family each evening. Once all the kids have moved out, or perhaps while some still live at home, this apartment could, in theory, also be rented out to someone else. But it could also be, a guest apartment for when, you have family visiting for like long periods of time. Or just in general, be a guest space for visitors. Now, I myself come from Aarhus originally, but currently I live in Copenhagen. But when I go to visit family in Aarhus, I sometimes borrow a guest apartment that my niece has access to via the apartment complex that she lives in, and this gives the visitor and the host freedom during the visit, so you don't have to be in each other's faces constantly, which I quite like, and I hope she also enjoys. I hope that when I at some point get my own place, that I will also have a similar opportunity, so I can have visitors without them feeling like they are a burden to me or that they are dependent on me, and so that I can host them and still have space to breathe myself. Now, as you can see, Emma's bedroom is almost done. I have kept things, nice and bright, and then I've muted it a bit with the accent wall by the end of the bed. I know very few are fans of the floor, by the way, that I chose here, but I think it deserves some time to shine, and I thought this was the build to do that with. And after adding some final decor, we will be moving straight to furnishing the living room space. Personally, I would have loved to have this much personal space back when I was a teenager. I personally need quite a bit of space to rest and relax when I'm home. I need my alone time. Generally, I'm quite outgoing in most social situations, but I am introverted in the sense that I gain more energy from my alone time. But it is obviously a balance that is needed. So I'm honestly living vicariously through Emma in building this. Having this much space while still being at home with my family, amazing. Now, I am the youngest out of 5, and all of my siblings had moved out when I was a teenager. I lived with my mum, our dog, Chena, and my cat, Kovu. So it's not like I didn't have space, really. I would have loved more space like this. With all due respect to my mother, as I'm telling this, sometimes I would just need to watch television and not be social, so I would be in the living room, and then my mom would need to socialize, and I would tell her that I needed space, which she would then feel hurt by, and then, she would tell me to go to my room, which I would then refuse, because even when I needed my alone time, I also needed to have physical space to chill out in. After one such argument, my mother and I switched rooms, so I would have the larger room instead, which gave me the physical space that I had needed. So even if my mother was hurt by my rejection, she still listened and saw the underlying need. And she sacrificed much of her own personal space for the sake of mine. Now, going back to the build, you can see I'm just finishing up Emma's personal bathroom here. And then we go back to furnishing the living room. I do jump a lot around from room to room. If I'm unsure of how to deal with a space, I move to another, and then a plan will usually unfold bit by bit. You may have noticed I'm using the Dream Home Decorator pack quite a lot. I think the pack has some really neat items for the sleek modern look, especially a sleek Danish look, or at least I think so. I wanted Emma to have space to entertain a few guests in her own space, so she can easily have friends from school over to visit. And I know her space is very pastels and pinks, but that's just her vibe. I don't know what else to tell you. It is more common for Danes to be more into white, grey and black. Black in particular is probably what most Danes wear usually, wherever they go. The reason usually being that it goes with everything. It's an easy and convenient color. Danes, we get criticized a lot by foreigners visiting Denmark for this tendency to just wear black all the time. Although most of us do wear a dash of color once in a while. As you can see, I thought a yoga mat was fitting for her personality, but I didn't think it made much sense in the room. So instead, I used the space for a small dining table. The living space of this little youth apartment is structured around the ability for her to entertain a group of friends, so a dining table was more useful than a yoga mat, even though she does have bar stools by the kitchenette. Now you can see I made the ridiculous decision to move an entire window, something you would not be able to really do in real life. And upon realizing how silly that idea was and how dumb it looked from the outside, I did change it back later, so don't worry. And then I am just adding the final touches with some pictures and some decor, and then Emma's youth apartment is pretty much done. And yes, I do realize that this apartment could have been an entire standalone build video. I do. Coming back to the main house, I had realized that since there was a room upstairs for the parents' bedroom, I didn't need to create a new room for them downstairs. So instead we keep the old kitchen, but we take down some walls to open it up to the dining space. I didn't take all the walls down, as some of them I imagine are bearing walls, meaning they are necessary to keep the second floor where it is. And yes, I am aware that the second floor will not collapse in The Sims as it might in reality, but I like to have a bit of realism in my builds. My suspense of disbelief has a limit, and this is just about it. I went through a lot of color changes with this kitchen, and I was really unsure of how I wanted to decorate it. Classical Danish design would probably be open, bright, and white, but that's not what I wanted. I didn't want it to be overly modern, I didn't want it to be super bright, but the very dark counters here also made it a little too dark. In the end, I changed the color scheme a bit once the dining room was finished, so the two spaces could fit together better. Also, when this video is posted, it will have been several weeks from when I finished the build and uploaded it to the gallery. It takes a lot of time to edit and make voiceovers for videos, at least for me. And I can only really do voiceovers in specific time frames when I'm alone in the house, which is when everyone else is at work. So I couldn't do anything during Easter, for example, because everyone else was home. Also, I celebrate Ramadan. I have usually been sleeping until noon because fasting hours start around 3 or 4 in the morning for me. Which means I have to stay awake in the night in order to get all the food and water that I need, and also for prayers. So during the holy month of Ramadan, I have had a bit of trouble finding time to do this voiceover. I've also had, meetings in the afternoon and job interviews, so my schedule has just been a little bit filled up. I really hope I will be able to make videos that are slightly shorter in the future as well. This is a fairly big build, so it isn't surprising that it takes a lot of time to edit and make voiceovers for it. However, it is also just, a very long video. I really need to make shorter videos. Maybe I should make a micro home build. Anyway, I have sort of finished the kitchen now, but the colors just didn't seem right to me. I really wanted to use these vine curtains that you see here in a moment. But they just didn't fit the build. I don't know where they will actually fit, but I want to use them at some point. Not in this build, mind you, but at some point I want to be able to use those curtains in a build. I tried to brighten the kitchen up with different walls and decor, but in the end I just moved to working on the dining space before I really finished the kitchen. In both spaces, I wanted to keep the farm vibes going, and I also wanted to see if I could reuse some items from the original build, since the new owners are minded on sustainability. That's also why I put most of the stuff out into the yard, so I could pick items out of the pile to use in the renovated build. I did intend to reuse more of the furniture, but I ended up with mostly reusing a few decor items. Now you see me trying to use one of the jungle adventure cabinets. I think it fits well with the whole farmy vibe, and it looks like something my mom would have in her living room. Jungle Adventure really has some great items, I think. However, for all the bathroom items they have, they could have included a toilet. I once tried to do a one room, one pack kind of challenge, and for a bathroom I had to use Jungle Adventure. It became a room for bathing, definitely. It did not have a toilet. Another room got a toilet, but still, it felt a little incomplete. And here you see me reminding myself that this family has a dog. I did forget. And now I really begin working on the dining space. The old dining table and chairs was not doing it for me at all. I needed to modernize it a bit. I wanted to have a bit of an accent wall, although it does make the long room seem a bit longer. And then I moved on to struggle with wallpaper for the rest of the space, so great success. I did not keep that stock green there for long, so don't worry. Instead, I tried to warm the space up a bit, going for some yellow and red tones. But I had to shuffle through them quite a bit. I settled on this soft yellow color, and then I will be adding more color through the decor and furniture. There will be a sitting area in the other end of the dining room with some rather bright colored furniture as well. And as you can see, I had a bit of vine clicking through the wall. I tried to move it about, but it didn't help much, which is a shame. I think it looks very cute on the outside with these grapevines, but it doesn't do any good if it clips through to the inside. As the color scheme is coming more together, I also wanted to find another rug for the dining table. We have so many options, yet it is always difficult to find a good rug that fits both in size, color, and vibe, I think. Maybe if we could switch sizes and forms, like with cabinets, if we could do that for rugs, this part would probably be easier. These paintings from Get Famous are some of my favorite decor items, and they fit well into a Danish home, I think. They remind me of some of the paintings my godmother has in her apartment, actually. As I progressed with this dining area, it also reminded me more and more of the way my mother decorated our living room when I was living at home. Especially with the yellow and green curtains. I ended up switching them out with some red ones. Yeah, these ones. After the switch to red curtains, I think the room came more together, although I did feel like it was a bold choice. But with the red in the pictures, I thought it worked out pretty well. I also changed the end wall to a deep red, which warmed up the room quite a bit, especially as I added some wall-mounted lamps. You'll see here. Now I apparently painted that little side wall red as well, the one going towards the kitchen. That was a mistake. I don't think I fixed that at any point either, but it's a little too late now anyway, so whoopsies! I found a great little spot for that linen shelf thing right under the stairs. It fits perfectly, and it's not an object the Sims can actually use, so it's not blocked by anything either, so that's good. I wanted to have a little sitting area in the dining room, pretty much like we had a sitting room in the original setup as well. And I ended up using some really vibrant colors, but it seemed to work well with the other colors in the space already. I'm actually not a big fan of the color yellow in general, but somehow I end up using it a lot in these builds. Maybe I'm just torturing myself. Anyway, I really like the items from the Paranormal Stuff Pack, as you can see, although I would have liked some more chill swatches as well, or just some neutral ones. The chill swatches are very pastel, which wasn't what I was going for either. But it worked out nicely with the vibrant colors, I think. Moving on to the little entrance, I kinda wanted to recreate the setup we had in my home when I was growing up. Basically having some sort of surface and storage and a nice big mirror by the door. so you can check yourself before you go out. Also, I really wish we had a key bowl and a litter tray as clutter items in the game, or something similar to this. A key rack would also be nice. Generally, little practical things that people would have in their homes. Of course, nowadays it is rare to receive real mail, also called snail mail, when everything is digital, but it does still happen. But storage for keys and wallets would be nice as clutter items. Also, more portrait-y pictures like these. I could of course just create some myself with photography, but that would make builds a lot more work, probably. Next, we move to the living room, or the TV room. At least it will become a TV room. The room will be a slightly odd mix of modern and old style, probably. I wanted it to be somewhat modern, but just like with the kitchen and dining space, I also wanted to maintain the farm vibes. I also wanted some old style mixed in for the sake of hygge. The older farmy styles are just more hyggely, I think, but that might just be me. The living room is also where you would probably congregate more in order to hygge together in general. Essentially, the best spaces for hygge is where you can socialize in a relaxed way, so the best space really is on a sofa in front of a fireplace, at least for this type of hygge. Since I think green is a good color for a relaxed space, I ended up making the room greener than the smoothies I force myself to drink every day. I might be overestimating that. It really is just the accent wall and some of the furniture. I do love this rich emerald green color though. And as you can see, I tried to use some more old looking decor items, but it just didn't work for the space. Instead, I set up some shelves and filled them up with clutter and art. I was a little sad that I could not make it work with that old clock though. I actually I had one myself, an heirloom from my grandmother on my dad's side, as far as I remember. But it's not with me, like physically, it's at my sister's place. Since I moved out at 18, I haven't really lived in a place that was entirely my own, so I rarely settle in completely. This also means that I don't prioritize getting the bigger wooden furniture that I've inherited with me, because I don't know where I might be living in the next couple of years. I also had what's called a trip-trap chair, which is a sort of children's chair that you can convert into a toddler chair and a children's chair as they get older. It's very common in Danish children's homes, or at least it was when I grew up. My siblings thought that I was absolutely mental for not caring about it, but I am now 31 and I don't have kids, I am not married, there doesn't seem to be any room for kids in my life currently. So why bother with a children's chair? I think perhaps my brother got it when he had his daughter, which is now 12 or so years ago. I don't know if he still has it even. Anyway, back to the build. The living room has taken some form now and it will be a bit more modern still. I will be switching the bookcase out with the one from the Dream Home Decorator. I use this pack quite a lot, I know, but it's just very versatile and sleek. And it looks like something a Danish person would have in their home. I suppose it's very IKEA-ish in design. And we do love IKEA. It is also the biggest furniture and home decoration warehouse that is also affordable to most people, almost regardless of income. But of course, the quality also matches that price generally. Also, I now realize that I probably should have taken that console on top of the fireplace and put it onto one of these shelves. Oh well, they got well cluttered up anyway. I added some toys and children's decor to the shelves because it is a home with children and the toddler's room is right by that door. So it made sense to me that this would also be visible on the shelves here. I don't know about you guys, but I think it makes sense for it to be visible in the entire house if there are children living there. I have now lived with a small child who's now 4 for the last 2 years, and it is clearly visible all over the place that she lives here. Her toys will just find a way to infiltrate every space in the house. It is definitely more concentrated in areas like her room and the living room where she spends more time, but of course her things will be spread a little bit beyond that. Now the downstairs of the main house is pretty much done and we will move to furnishing the upstairs, starting with this little bathroom here. I based the design decisions on the fact that I wanted to reuse this bathtub here, so the general feel of this room has some farm vibes going, but that is especially because of the sink and the adjacent cabinets. And I now use the bidet-style toilet in almost all my builds, I think. I just think it's neat. And for a moment there I thought I had forgot to put toilet paper in there, but seems like I didn't, so that's nice. Of course it's less of an issue when you have a bidet, but still. I like the vibe of this bathroom in the end. In lack of better descriptors, it looks soft and relaxing. I imagine the mother, Karina, having some nice spa Saturdays in there. And after this bathroom, we moved to the son's room, for which I took down one wall and created a new one to give the kid more space. As you can see here. For this room I ended up just theming it around blue. It became very stereotypically gendered, so did the older sister's room. I suppose I have some biases to work on here. But I think it worked out well in the end, and it seems like a room this kid would like. The room became a bit split into 2 spaces, so the TV and console area becomes very much its own space, I think, and then the rest of the room feels slightly more private. Might just be me. Nevertheless, I think it works. It does lean more towards a tween room, I think, rather than purely a kid's room. So when he becomes a teenager, you just remove the toys and it's a teenage boy's room. And some toys I put into the weird little hallway space instead, like the tent and the experimentation station. The tent can also be used by the toddler, so it makes more sense that it's in a more common space. But I also feel like these pieces are just rather big to be in someone's personal space. I know I would be a little stressed out by them at least. I can get very stressed out by the space I live in. If there's too much clutter and mess, I can't really be in my own skin. But on the other hand, if it's too minimalistic and there's not enough clutter, the room will feel more clinical and stress me out with just too much empty space instead. But also, like very large objects that are not containers for something, like bookcases, closets, and so on, are containers for something. But larger objects that aren't would freak me out just a little bit. That's also part of the reason why I keep my sewing machine in another room, even if it isn't actually that big of an object. Same thing with my easel. Essentially, me and the other person who rents a room in this house share a small common space that is used for storage, but also has our fridge and freezer and so on. So we keep our food in there. But it's also generally a storeroom for other things, so I keep some books and kitchenware in there that isn't generally used, and I also store the clothes that aren't in season and so on in there, as well as suitcases, my easel, sewing machine, and so on. Essentially, anything that I don't use that often is stored in there. And it might sound a little bad, but I actually haven't used my easel in over 2 years. And my sewing machine, it's been more than 5 years since I last used it. I actually do have some sewing projects that I need to fix, such as taking off some length of a dress I bought recently, but I don't really feel like I have a good workspace for it. Like, sure, I have the sewing machine, but I would also need a good work table to sew on. And I don't really have that currently. Back to the build, you can see I have finished the kids' bedroom and I'm now furnishing this little odd hall space here. It ended up being a bit of a miscellaneous space, so there's some kid stuff, there's some storage, and then there's a small office space. The parents are not the types to really sit in front of a computer the entire day, so having just a shared office space seems appropriate. It is not really up to par with how most people do things nowadays, but when I was young, this was pretty normal. And since the parents have a slightly smaller bedroom, I figured they ought to have some extra storage space for their clothes here. And also it just gives the space more of a purpose. They will also have some storage space in their room for clothing, but not a lot for 2 people. But maybe they are minimalistic when it comes to clothing. For their bedroom, because it is quite small, I didn't want there to be a lot of clutter. I wanted it soft, somber, and clean, so that it feels calm to be in there. And I think it worked out pretty alright. And I know it's not very small, but compared to the bedrooms of the kid and the teenager, it is a bit small. I would say it is actually a pretty standard size for a bedroom in general. Color-wise, it did get a little dull perhaps, but the plants helped a bit, I think. It is actually interesting how many plants I use in Sims builds when I myself have not been able to keep a single small succulent alive for more than a few months, really. I sometimes buy myself flowers, but they of course die within a few days. So I don't actually have any plants in my room at all at this moment. The only reason I buy myself flowers once in a while is because I like to receive flowers. And since I gotta give myself the love that I would want someone else to give me, I give myself flowers. It might sound a little sad, but I think it is more sad to wait for someone else to give me flowers when no man or woman has ever given me flowers of their own volition as a romantic gesture of appreciation. My ex once did, but only because I asked for it, and he got me the cheapest ones from Facta or Netto, and this was for his proposal to me. It was very disappointing, to say the least, and it didn't last, so there's that. And you might sit there wondering why I even care about flowers. And the answer is quite simple. One of my primary love languages is gifts. That is how I receive love. And gifts don't have to be super fancy or expensive. It's the thought that counts. However, that also means that when someone gives me gifts only upon request and not out of love, and you take the cheapest stuff you can find, then that makes me feel like loving me is made into a chore. So it matters. Flowers, even, they matter. Now in the build, you can see I have made the old barn into 2 activity and creativity spaces. I thought this was the best way to utilize them, although it does become a tad bit miscellaneous. But honestly, I kinda like the miscellaneousness of it. And I decided to remove the latrine and cover it with greens. I don't think anyone will miss that. And now we get to the final room, which I made into a small banquet hall. It is quite common, my mother told me, to make these old barn spaces into banquet halls upon renovation, and it makes sense. Then you have designated space for larger parties and celebrations. For this, the wedding pack became quite handy, and it had been released just a few days before I worked on this room, I believe. I did try the wedding features a few days ago actually, and it is honestly still a bit buggy. But I think my issue was that the two people getting married did not live together yet, so I had to switch between households. So even though the groom had chosen the cake and it was removed from the active inventory, because I'd switched households, suddenly this had changed. And I didn't notice until I saw the groom taking a piece from the wedding cake. I was genuinely upset. I could have reached through the screen and slapped that sim silly, but oh well. And it was too late to fix because the wedding was starting. Also, the first dance never happened because the bride and groom went to different stereos. A lot of the wedding ceremony, the sims would just stand around and look goofy. I was so frustrated with this pack, or with this ceremony, the wedding ceremony. I was super frustrated with it. And now the banquet hall is almost done, and that concludes this renovation. If you have more challenges for me to do, let me know in the comments. Beyond that, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.